today. We're very excited for the discussion that's about to happen with some great panelists. We jointly between the Analyst Syndicate and SINC produced a marketing study about the challenges and opportunities of 2020 into 2021. So today we're going to spend some time discussing real life challenges, real life opportunities, where these marketing executives are finding leads, some of the virtual event fatigue that we're all experiencing, and just walk away with some takeaways as to what our peers are doing and what we can do going forward. So before we get into the introductions, we're going to actually just do a quick little poll just to see where everyone is and how far you are along with your planning. And we'll touch upon this and kind of the outcome of that as we get further into our discussion. But Tom, if you'd like to take a moment to introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, everybody. This is Tom Austin. I'm 40+ year veteran of the IT industry, spent 25 years with Gartner in a variety of different positions, including worldwide head of research. 2 years, a little over 2.5 years ago almost, I founded the Analyst Syndicate, which is a collection today of 35 former big name analysts with big name companies rather. We do things very differently at the Syndicate. We're really right now 35 independent individuals who work together to support each other. We're not a top-down hierarchically driven organization. But enough about us. We're going to talk about some of the travails I think that all of us are going through, and the report we wrote is about the changes, the difficult changes that we're facing in marketing. But I want to just make the comment to begin that this is a bad time, but it's also an amazing time. You have to think about this. Had somebody told you on the 1st of January this year, oh, well, all of this is going to happen, including the pandemic and shutting down offices and getting rid of in-person events and everything else, how long do you think you would have said it would take to plan for that and make it happen? We survived that transition thus far. So I think we ought to have a little positive sprinkling of sentiment on top of what we're talking about. But I'll put it back to you, Catherine.
Thank you very much, Tom. Fully in agreement, and we look forward for everyone to download our report as well. We'll be posting this in the chat window for everyone to take a look at. As we get into the introductions, we'll talk through some of the poll that we just had, but I'd love to introduce our panelists. We have with us Cheryl Knight from Nutanix, who's the Vice President of Americas Marketing and Global Demand. We have the CMO of Ativo Networks, Carolyn Crandall, and the CMO of Attack IQ, Julie O'Brien, sorry. Julie, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, sure. Hey, it's a pleasure to be here and trade best practices and lessons learned and some more stories with some fellow marketing colleagues. So I have been in marketing for more years than I care to discuss at this point. I've been in a variety of startups and mid-sized companies, starting out on the East Coast and making my way out to the West Coast when Cisco acquired a startup that I was at. Happened to work for 5 years with Cheryl over at Nutanix, one of my favorite companies, and I think a huge disruptor, especially on the marketing front. So I'm excited to hear what she has to share today. And I am one of those crazy people who decided to make a career change during the pandemic. So in April, I switched from a 7,000 person company that was doing fantastic, still is, Nutanix, and decided to roll up the sleeves and go to a 100 person startup in the cybersecurity industry, which, by the way, I've also never worked in directly. So, why not mix it up in the height of a crisis and take on a new challenge? And so it's been really interesting for me because obviously my budget has changed, the size of my team has changed, the strategy has changed in terms of the playbooks that used to work. And so it has been a very interesting and challenging time, and I know we'll get into more of those details, but that's a little bit about me, and we'll let someone else do an intro.
Cheryl, why don't we go to you?
All right, well, thanks. I like Julie, I've been in the industry for a while. I've been at a variety of size companies, but I would describe myself as a bit of a startup junkie. I really like the just kind of attack and go and everybody, working towards a common goal and, just that excitement of, reinventing yourself into a startup and being disruptive. Though I've been at Nutanix for 7 years, and I would say we're far from a startup at this point, and it's more of a scale kind of play, which I'm really enjoying. But with this time with COVID, it actually is exciting for me because it really stimulates that startup junkie, vein or bone, that I have in that, it's just a great time to reinvent marketing. We reinvent companies, we've all been part of companies that have reinvented themselves, but now we get a chance to reinvent marketing. So I'm really excited about this time, even though it is a difficult and challenging time. It's definitely an exciting one.
Like that quite a bit. Thank you. And Carolyn.
All right. Well, hi, everybody. So similar, and I've been in the tech industry for about 30 years now, probably the last 15, all kind of as the head of marketing at companies of various sizes. And it's one of the things I've always been attracted. I hear Cheryl talk about startup junkie. I guess I've caught the bug or the addiction as well. I've worked for big companies like Cisco and Seagate and Riverbed and others. And then the last probably dozen years has all been kind of more the startup type of world. And one of the things that I think you crave in that is the disruption, right? You're trying to make markets or change markets or really do something innovative. And everybody really got thrust into that at the beginning of this year. And so it really taxed a lot of organizations to go, how fast can we respond and get back on our feet? And doing it in a period of a lot of unknowns. So, we all are familiar with the phrase, fail fast. And what we've been faced with is a lot of new things to have to try and have to be quick on our feet to fail fast if things didn't work and to really lean into the things that were. And then realizing even in a short period of time, the things that worked at the beginning of COVID are no longer working quite the same way, 6 or 9 months into it. And, and we need to change again. And so it's really a lot of fun to be here today and be able to talk to people about, the changes and what we're doing. And for context, Ativo Networks, I've been with the company for 5.5 years now, is employee number 26. So I've kind of seen the growth of it, and we're a couple hundred employees now. Cybersecurity, very congested, busy field, lots of noise, lots of activity. And so, I'm happy to share today some of the things that we've had to do to really compete, for kind of that attention with people that are now in a place where you can't reach them quite as easy as you could through those face-to-face events, or even picking up the phone in many cases. And so really, I'm looking forward to diving into the conversation about, what's changed and how have we responded to it, and share the insights we've gathered as to what you maybe want to pass on, or do differently than some of the things that we've decided to walk away from as we go into 2021.
So why don't we start by talking about the top learning opportunities that you felt you went through this year, the learning experiences. If we could just start with Julie, perhaps.
Sure. I think we all know that webinars are now like the dirty W word. And what used to work and be like a key part of the machine just is challenging. And when I joined in April, I would say webinars were still kind of a key performer for the mix, filling the gap of physical events falling to the wayside. But then it quickly became obvious that everyone's doing it, and you have to figure out how you're cutting through the noise, right? And so we tried to pivot, and just one of the lessons learned, and thought we were being creative and kind of clever, and let's get this bourbon guy to come and talk about how he's crafting his special bourbons, and we'll do a nice executive roundtable. By the time we had that into play, which wasn't really that much longer, from April, maybe it was like end of May, beginning of June, people were already fatigued over like Zoom and alcohol. Just don't do it anymore. Everyone's hitting them up from a vendor perspective. So then I was like, okay, well, what's next, right? Like you try to just keep like upping your game on these virtual events that we're filling the vacuum for physical events. So quick learning was, webinars of the dirty W word. And how do you talk about virtual events in a different way? Maybe fireside chats, or an intimate discussion, or and really try to find meaningful content. I mean, I think one of the big learnings has been that content is king, And even more so during COVID, because it's got to be relevant. It's got to be relevant for your buyer, for them to want to choose one webinar over another webinar, or one virtual event over another virtual event. So I'll stop there. I'm sure everyone agrees with me that webinars are now like the dirty W word. But I'm curious what else.
Can I kind of jump in with a kind of a counter view on that? So I think the traditional webinar is dead, and we tried something different by going to lunch and learns. And in these, they're very technical, right? They're not the typical, 30,000 foot view of things. Because I do agree with those. Everybody is so tired, and you get 15 invites a day and you just zone out. But what we did try, and we're on our second wave of them now. We did some midsummer, and now we're in the middle of our second wave, which I think our last one ends next week for the year, is we did these lunch and learns that were very targeted. To come in, we gave people some gift cards, $25 for lunch to cover lunch so they could order it in. But to do a technical discussion and to do it as an under the hood view, right? We're going to talk to you about things that we would not generally talk about in an open audience, but to show you how to use the technology for a use case and how you digest the output of that information. And so with, again, emerging technology, a lot of people just don't really know how the technology works. And so, we're generally pulling 150 plus people that are registered, and probably around 120 or so that show up live. We don't offer playbacks on it, so another motivation to show up. So again, I do agree with what Judy said, that the traditional webinar is dead, but I think the spin is that there's still a desire to get technical information in a way that they're not feeling like they have to be face to face with a salesperson. These are all done through our SE organization. And so, so it's a very different format. And again, it's something to think about. What is the value that they're trying to get? What's the gap they're trying to fill, and how do you fill that? And so just as a opposite thought on that, or a different thought on that, is those have tended to work well. And then I'll kind of an extension of the other piece webinar. There's like a online event forum, of the day, of multiples per the day. And if I look at the number of events on November 17th and 18th, there's probably 50 of them. And so the other thing that we found, back to what works and doesn't work, is if you do these virtual events, really look at the platforms, because a lot of them are just not very good. And we also noticed that if we don't have a speaking opportunity, just showing up and expecting any engagement is really going to yield marginal results. And so the other formula was, speak, make sure that you invest in the speaking, because if you don't, it's maybe not even worth being there in the first place. So just, again, a couple topics around kind of that online engagement and how you might be able to get it.
Carolyn,
do you have something to share with regard to the platforms? You mentioned some are better than others. I mean, what were your experiences on the platforms? And Cheryl, you're next, but I just wanted to follow up on that point. I'm sorry.
Yeah, every vendor is a little different, and some will make it almost look like a SharePoint experience. Some will have a booth with assets you can download. Some will have you play little videos. But the problem all becomes the engagement, right? They're not as likely to go cruise through the exhibit hall, the virtual exhibit hall, unless there's motivation. And doing the raffles is not necessarily the best motivation, because if you just have somebody clicking in so they qualify, you're not really getting a good lead. And so a lot of times they're very, very limited in how you can articulate what your company does and why it's different. And that's why the speaking can help if they have that in the platform. And so the vendors are learning, right? So Black Hat, the event that they did in July was terrible, right? Gartner Security Summit was terrible from an online experience. And I'm, don't mean to offend anybody, but I think that those vendors have realized that they had issues with their platforms. And it's always, to me, then the corrective action, right? What are they doing with it? And so for Black Hat UK, they're coming back and saying, well, we've changed it. And now we're doing these things to drive engagement. And so I think it's a process as you work with the vendors that you work with, that everybody's trying to figure this out. And so you got to be a little patient, but you also have to command the value that you want. And if they're willing to work with you, then you may try it again, or maybe you just go, it's simply not going to work because that platform can't improve enough to get you to where you want to be. An interesting one right now, I think the HISEC for the healthcare ISEC is doing one, and they've gone through extensive measures to try to get engagement and other activities. And so again, I think it's going to be a learning process, and you really should get a demo of the platform and understand how they're going to drive engagement as part of your diligence process to determine if you want to do these virtual events or not. And also the ROI value, right? Some of them are up as high as $40,000 for an engagement. And if you're a small company, can you really get that kind of ROI back or not? So again, you just have to really do your diligence to understand them.
Well, thanks very much. Cheryl.
Yeah, so just to add to what Carolyn and Julie said, engagement is really the key. And I would say even the, so the events themselves aren't the problem, and the webinar, doing a virtual event, I believe still work. What we found though is the interactivity has to be there. So even some of the best programs, there's a lot of pre-recorded content that people are doing now. And, we do a lot of experiential events as well that, can fall flat if it's one way. And, especially the pre-recorded content, we've used it successfully and we've used it unsuccessfully. And when it's been unsuccessful, it's because there's no interactivity whatsoever. And even if you're using a recorded medium, you could be very active in the chat. You can have a host that's tying that all together, that's bringing alive the chat so that you feel like you're immersed in it, even if you're not having a conversation. And things like experiential events. So like what Julie mentioned, we do this whiskey and watches event, or we'll have a comedian, which I thought was very risky, having a comedian on a virtual activity. And, there were times where it fell flat because a comedian thrives off of the audience participation. And so if it's just quiet and there's nothing happening, it feels very awkward. And I actually was on an industry event where they had a musician on, a very famous musician, and you could tell the musician felt awkward just because he wasn't getting any feedback of people applauding. I felt bad for him, right? And so, we've seen great success when we, on a smaller forum where it's more intimate, let people be part of the conversation, let them verbally be part of the conversation. If it's a bigger format, and we have had musicians on a program that was very successful, we'll have a host that is very interactive. They're having conversations, they're pulling stories out of chat to share with the musician, they're commenting after each song that, hey, everybody, chat is lighting up of all the clapping that's going on. So you feel like that person is in your living room. And we find that people really do want to engage with us. We haven't seen fatigue in our virtual activities because, people are craving interaction. So you have to give them that. You have to find a way to give them that. If you just present to them, they're not going to engage. And one other, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Cheryl.
Well, I was just going to add to that, as well as doing somewhat, commenting on what Carolyn said about your technical webinars. It sounds like the way that you did those was like of a series. And I think when you do those as, we're not just doing one-off events anymore. We are putting things as part of a series so that you can develop a following. Because again, people want to engage. Once they do one, then more people are going to come to the next one. More people are going to come to the next one because they know what to expect and they feel a part of it. We're surveying them after of, hey, what do you want to hear in the next one? So again, we're just involving them all the way through. And so far, since we've been doing that, we've not seen the fatigue. Only when we try and do a big event where we pretty much kind of close them off, present to them, and there's no interactivity, that's where we tend to fall flat.
And what I was about to say is, from an engagement perspective, for those who are participating, there is a chat function here. So if you have questions for the panelists, please participate. We do have a question actually from the audience. Is there maybe a death spiral for virtual events? They still cost money to put on, now platform fees, but partners aren't seeing leads through virtual booths. They're increasingly reluctant to invest, and attendees aren't as willing to fork out money to watch videos. So even with content and interactivity and better platforms, will the business model be able to survive, in your opinion? Love to hear what you have to say, Carolyn.
Yeah, no, it has to change. I mean, and been a very frank conversation that we've had with a lot of the event organizers about what they need in the platform. Because I think to Cheryl's point, if you don't have the engagement and you just expect people to find you and have a static interaction, it's not going to work that well. And so, every discussion that we have with our vendors is what are they doing to drive engagement? And when we even look at the look and the feel of the booths, the virtual booths that they're putting up today, again, if it's not able to let you convey your message and then be able to have the engagement, like some booths don't even give you the opportunity to know who's coming into your booth, right? So why would I pay money to do that, right? There's not a great benefit, and you can't have the same information you would have on your website because they would just go to your website and get it in the first place. And so those vendors that are not able to adjust are going to find it's going to get harder. And I think there's an adjustment of the budget, right? We went into the budgets, and I'm sure that there's a lot of big vendors that went and said, okay, well, I was going to spend millions of dollars at like a Black Hat or an RSA, and you can just kind of dole these out at virtual events, and you can cover them all in a pretty grand way. But now we're going to go through phase 2, and you're going to start to see that ROI and the leads and the engagement aren't there. And so it is going to cause an adjustment, right? I think these platform vendors or these providers have been able to kind of live off of it because there was well, I didn't spend the money here, so I'm going to go redirect it towards these things. But the next wave, if that ROI wasn't there and the platforms don't change so that the vendors can achieve their goals and get qualified leads, I do think some are going to go out of business. And I think that there's going to be a lot of thought too for going to those sessions for engagement. When you have these little roundtable forums, everybody's trying for the same pockets of people to talk to, whether it's all after their CISOs or their CIOs. And those folks are going to get fatigued too, right? Even when it becomes a personalized experience. And so I do think there probably will be a bit of a pruning. Not that they won't still be out there trying to have a successful business model, but I don't think that there's going to be enough opportunity, just given the target audience, to have all of them survive.
So if that money dries up, which it will in some cases, where's it going to go in 2021? Is it going to disappear from the marketing budgets entirely, or is it going to be redirected to some new area?
I mean, I can tell you what we've done, which has been pretty exciting. It was already in motion when I joined, but along the lines of content is king and, creating relevance for your audience, there was already a motion in place to launch a brand new cybersecurity academy that was free industry training for practitioners. And that has taken off like unbelievably for us. When we launched, we had probably just a couple of hundred registrants. We've now seen almost 7,000 registrants for this academy courses from 126 countries. And we've, exploded the learning paths, exploded the classes. It's gone viral on LinkedIn. We do shout outs when people complete their courses and they're posting their Credly badges, and then they're in turn sharing that out with their networks, and their networks are commenting, congratulations on your new certification. So that has been just an amazing opportunity for us to get close to prospects without coming in as a sales pitch. And more than ever, I feel that IT buyers are just kind of closing off because we're all pouncing on them over email, over virtual events, right? And we've already seen this trend as marketers, that people are doing their own research before they want to engage in a sales conversation. And so Academy for us is a way to approach, our prospective buyers in a very non-threatening kind of way. So community build out is where we're going to be investing, building out the Academy content and courses and training, and giving people a way to get to know us without having to have that kind of hard sales engagement.
Julie, are you seeing client engagement in that as well? So, I mean, obviously we're all looking for prospects to fill the pool, but what are you doing and how are you using that for your current clients?
For existing customers?
Yes.
Yeah, they're excited about it too, because it's industry concepts. So for example, purple teaming right now is something that people are really interested in the cyber community space. So being able to come in, get their teams educated on what it means to have a red team and a blue team actually collaborate and cooperate into this concept of purple teaming is really interesting for them. So that kind of content is relevant for our customers as well.
Great. Cheryl or Carolyn, are you seeing or doing anything similar?
Well, for us, we had a pretty big investment. So I cover both field marketing and the global demand teams. And in the field marketing side, we had a pretty heavy investment in events. A lot of that has shifted. I would say it hasn't gone away. But, the nice thing about a virtual activity is now we don't have to do so many regional events that are siloed. Now we can do more one-to-many, and we can all benefit off of a centralized event. So we've been doing, we invested in a large series called IT Unplugged, where we have some thought leadership, we have a customer, we have a musician on, and that has been a series that we've been rinsing and repeating. And so instead of in theater marketing having, events that have 30 people at a time, across, hundreds of events, we'll have one activity that's driving 1,000 people or 2,000 people, and partnering so that we can get the net new, partnering with a partner like Citrix or HPE that can help us, drive more engagement and net new. So that's been great to replace I would say our lead funnel. And then we now are able to direct more into our global teams to develop more programmatical activities. And I will say, I'm very excited to hear what, I need to talk to Julie a little bit more about what she's doing, but completely agree, more customer engagement, more customer education. There's a big appetite for that. And also our partner community, our partner, I would say we're doing much more enablement in marketing than we ever had, because primarily our budget had been DG, it was all about MQLs, SALs, pipeline, cost per pipe, cost per bookings, but doing a lot more enablement and engagement. So I would say that's where that investment's going, both with prospects, customers, and channel.
So I'm very, very curious, Julie, and this is really to all of you. To what extent, as you developed the Cybersecurity Academy, it's a marvelous idea. Did you go out and acquire an existing operation that was running a small scale academy on the internet and embellish it, or did you just all internal development?
It was completely homegrown. And, I think all of us appreciate the scrappiness that comes with being in a startup. And so you grab someone who has a background maybe in enablement or training, and pull together people who can help with the content, try to find the right platform, the right LMS that you think is going to grow with you and scale with you and meet your objectives. And by the way, just like with webinar platforms or virtual events, we started with one LMS and then realized it just didn't actually have the features and the scale that we needed. So we had to change to a new LMS in the process. But yeah, it was really leveraging internal resources, and then also to build around that content, building out a guest lecture series, and bringing in some industry thought leaders to augment the formal courseware, if you will. So those were based on relationships, though. I mean, it wasn't a matter of a paid engagement for someone to be a guest lecturer. It was really reaching out into the relationships that the executive team and the team had in the industry to bring in some of these thought leaders.
Yeah. Other thoughts on that before we move on? And this one is going to be more directed towards you, Cheryl. As we look at 2019 and kind of things that have shifted and changed budget-wise and just overall, what would we like to see come back in 2021? And what would we like to see just evolve in marketing? We do a lot of discussion around about wanting things to be back to normal, but do we want it to be normal?
Yeah, I would say what I do want face-to-face events to come back, because, just human to human interaction, and maybe because I'm, my heart's on the field marketing side and close to sales, which I think as marketers, all of us are. We want that human interaction. So I hope that does come back. What I would love to see go away are large conferences and trade shows. I would be so happy if those never came back because I just feel like, and I will say, and we've done internally some great, and Julie knows what I'm talking about. She handcrafted our .next event, which I think is wonderful, and it has a very human element to interacting with people. So I don't want that to go away when you're doing a very specific user conference or something to get more intimate and engage at a global scale. I think that's still important to do. But you guys know, I mean, we talked about some of these where, these large shows where I feel like in some cases we're somewhat handcuffed that you have to be at this show because your competitor is going to be at that show. And if you're not there, you're not relevant. And so we spend $300,000 to have a booth, maybe have a little speaking slot. And, we get leads and we all feel good about it. We pat ourselves on the back with ROI. But I just think, we were spending, $1 million a quarter, on large events that I see what we can do with that $1 million and the engagement we can have and the programs I can run. I would rather do that all day long than attend, throw money at, a Gartner event just to be there and be relevant. To me, I would love to see us reinvent that. Or if those conferences come back, that they come back, and I saw a person put in the chat, I totally agree with you. If it comes back, it needs to be more intimate, or find a way to be more human to human contact and not just the big show. I just want the big show to just go away and for us to just, roll up our sleeves and get to work and interact in an authentic way.
Sure. And when you have the big show with 800 booths on a trade show floor, what's the chance that you're in fact going to get the business results you want out of it?
Yeah. And if you're going to do that, what I'd love to see too is vendors, stop having, if I can have 50 sponsors, let's have 50 sponsors. How about just pick 2 or 3 that you've crafted a story around, right? And that, maybe I would spend, $100,000 for that, or I might spend $300,000 for that. If it's very targeted and you pick vendors that have complementary kind of solutions and you craft a story around it, that I'd be willing to participate in. But let's not just sign up, 50 sponsors just because.
I would love to drill into that further. But there are a bunch of questions from people in the audience. Let me take one of them. We have to use some that we used a couple already. But so let's look at email marketing open rates. We found in the study that we did, we asked, what's the most effective new thing you're doing? Was one question. And the next question was, and what's the least effective new thing you're doing? And one of the top answers to both of them were the same thing: email marketing. What changes have you seen this year in email marketing open rates and click-throughs and so forth?
Yeah, if you want, I can jump in first on that one. So it's hard because everybody turned to email to try to communicate. And when I look at these things, I look at the activities in one-to-one, one-to-some, and one-to-many. And a lot of the communications that were going out were just very broad, general messages, and people just thought they were getting, essentially pepper sprayed, right? You're getting hit by all this stuff that's not really targeted or tailored to you, whether it be, the role you're in, the technology you're looking for, the size of your company. It's just everything was basically blast out there. And what a lot of people found, and it was interesting, I was just talking to another one of our portfolio companies about the comparison between the marketing rates and the rates that the SDRs have when they send their personalized emails. And it's interesting that both became more challenged this year just because of the volume. And and I think there's a lot of things that people need to think about as they decide what they're going to do as they go forward with email. Is one, at least have a one-to-some messaging, right? The SDR should keep up their one-to-one, and again, that's where you also have to manage the collision between marketing and SDRs, because you don't want to overly spam the people, and you got to manage the opt-outs and all of the logistics that sit behind that. But really refining targeting, some people will go ABM, some people will be purists in their definition of ABM being customers versus targeted prospecting. But without getting into definitions, is really have a targeted audience, and then clean up your database, right? If you got people that are not engaging with you and no interest, don't keep marketing to them. And that's a couple of the investments that we've made in this year, as we've looked at email is going to be a thing of the future. I think you have to do it to do at least the one to some, type of communications. But take a look at your database, and if you're emailing junk, or it's not hitting the inbox, or people are always deleting it, you're going to start to lose your reputation score. And so I would say, if you're going to do this, look at your practices, look at the cleanliness of your database, look at your reputation scores, and really start to look at those open rates, the conversion rates, the content you're putting behind them, and making sure that they're engaged. And then once you've done that, then look at your buyer's journey, right? It's not a one and a done. It's what are they engaging with? And when your prospect hits into the pipeline, what have they done up to that point of getting into the pipeline and looking for repeatable patterns? And then the second is once they're in the pipeline, what are the things that they engaged with to compress them into a deal cycle? And so, it's a lot of work to clean up your reporting and statuses, and how do you calculate your MQLs and SQLs once you do that. But it's really important to invest the time, because I don't think this is going away in 2021. It's just going to get more aggressive and competitive to get people. And if you don't have the face-to-face events, which everybody is saying at least till probably mid next year or longer, they're not going to really run them. Virtual events, if you don't see the ROI, you're not going to spend your money there. Your list of things you can do starts to get very specific, and email will likely be a part of it that you want to invest in.
Yeah, and Carolyn, just building on that, we've seen the exact same thing with regards to how emails are landing and being opened. And the SDR team is having much better success doing LinkedIn messaging than they are sending emails out the way that they did in the past. So that's become, the next way to engage. What worries me about that is, when does that now become, the traffic lane, and we start seeing people pull off the highway for that one. But LinkedIn has been one of the ways to cut through the clutter, and has been very helpful as far as starting the conversation.
Yeah, though I will say that even personally, my LinkedIn used to be my place of refuge. When I got a message in there, it was usually something I wanted to pay attention to. And it's so much clutter now that I do worry. I worry a lot about this LinkedIn piece, that we're gonna burn people out, and people are just gonna stop paying attention to even LinkedIn. And that unfortunately has been a good communication vehicle for social media and posting, but these personalized filling my inbox, where I can't now see the messages I really want to see from friends and associates, I do worry about that.
So I have one last question for everybody here. Don't think about your own company. Tell us about the one company you admire most in terms of having responded to the changes that we've now seen because of COVID and so forth. So who's that one company you admire most in terms of the quality of the marketing work that they're doing, aiming at the same kind of customers that you're aiming at?
I haven't seen any one, every once in a while I'll see little things that come out and I'm like, oh gosh, that is awesome. I wish I would have thought of that. I've seen some interesting things from Citrix, which actually, I didn't used to think of Citrix as the innovative marketer, but they're really hot right now. So I've seen some interesting things from them. And, I would say one thing that I saw out of LinkedIn Learning, which I've seen a couple people do, but it was LinkedIn Learning is the one that comes to mind, is these really brief videos to entice people to their content. So, it's just hey, we had this great chat with so-and-so at this company, here's a little snippet of our conversation, and kind of give a little, get a little glimpse of it. And then it really enticed me to jump in of like, oh, that sounds good. I want to jump in, you know, almost like Netflix or Amazon now, when you just kind of scroll over something, it actually plays part of the video. I'm really interested in that and think that's something interesting. But again, I wouldn't attribute that to one company, but I like that excited me. I'd be interested to the panelists if there's any that, that I should be looking at.
Yeah, Cheryl, you bring up an interesting point. I generally like, there's things that individual companies do that, I would say, okay, I like that thing. And I agree with you on the short videos. We've been running little insecurity snippets, and those have been really welcomed because they're short, right? In a few minutes, you get a sound bite, and then you're enticed to go in, because people don't have the patience right now to listen to hour sessions of everything, or even half hours. So so I think that's a good practice that's been seen out there. But I think it's been a little quieter. Like there's in talking to peers, when we talk about, well, what's the big idea, was there a big idea or a big theme or thing that people did in 2020? And I almost equate that to what a lot of the security and the IT professionals are going through right now, is that a lot of the thing is just, you need to be ready no matter where things pivot to, and looking at how do you adjust your business model. So I think as marketers, I think we've spent a lot of time looking kind of more internally at the resources, the actions, kind of the cleanliness of the house, so that as we move into 2021, we're better prepared for what we need to go do, with a little bit more visibility that it's this online world is going to be here to stay, maybe forever, in this level, or maybe it goes down a little bit, but I don't think it's going to go down much. A lot of thinking, as Cheryl talked about, if I'm not going to spend all this money on, one of these big, large conferences, how do I change my strategy and what I'm doing? And so I think 2021 may be a really interesting year to have companies stand out in what they're going to do. But I feel like 2020, I don't really have a vendor that I would say, oh gosh, I wish I had done what they had done, or I really exemplify what they had done. Because I think a lot of it's been kind of internal and reshuffling and just getting by, right? Keep the business running, so that we take advantage of IT spending not having dropped that much as we had thought. But especially as an emerging tech vendor, how do you then also combat them not just going what they already have installed and doing more of, right?
That's the scary thing. You're scaring me. Okay, you literally, because we know that IT sales have not dropped, right? But we know that our ability to effectively market to new buyers has. So what's wrong with this model? Where's it going?
Right, and that's one of the questions from one of our participants. Scott Lavery has a question: how are you ensuring sales is getting what they need? So I mean, it fits very much when we pivot away from traditional events. I'm sure across the board, everyone's seeing that.
Can I just comment on Tom's, and then you don't want to monopolize the time, but Tom, you bring up a good point. For our customers that already knew us, had our technology, we've seen double the growth from the year before. And that's because they're doubling down and trying to do or work with what they have and do it better. And I think that that's been a very large vendor play. And it has been exceptionally tough on the emerging tech vendors that are trying to come up and say, I have a new or a different way or new innovation, because it's not being heard as loud, and not having these face-to-face events where you actually have the time to explain why it's really different and why it really matters. That is the challenge for for these emerging vendors. I think the large guys will continue to play out and get stronger, and they're building their platform approaches to things. But if you're in the emerging tech space, you got to be smarter and you got to be faster. And that's why I think really assessing, what worked for you in 2020, what's burning out, right? Don't assume that just because it worked before, it's going to work again, and really getting ready to be fast and nimble in 2021 to be able to stay ahead, because the big guys will move slower, right? They have more processes and policies. So you got to plan to be quick and move fast in 2021. And that's, to me, that's a lot of how you're going to get ahead and cut through the noise, is do those things and be clever, do something that stands out in a witty way. Occasionally. Yeah. I mean, occasionally maybe, because you've got to cut through the noise. So if you do things exactly as everybody else, it's just going to get lost. So differentiation is going to be really big, and don't try to be everything to all people. Choose your target and be really focused to cut through that noise.
Well, and to that end, sometimes it's looking outside the industry too. We were talking about Peloton earlier, and one of the things they've done so well is just mobilize their community. And I think everyone wants to be part of a community and have sort of the security and the safety that 2020 has just not afforded, right? And so mobilizing that community, making people feel like they're part of your tribe, is a great strategy, and it's worked well for them. And we're starting to see early signs of that pay off for us with Academy too.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Well,
And Cheryl, any closing comments?
Well, you asked how do you make sure sales has what they need? And I would just offer to the audience that you're going to have to retrain your sales reps, because sales reps are used to having human-to-human contact, and they want their own event. And a one-to-many medium is very uncomfortable for them, but there is a way they can interact. They have to get involved in the chat. They have to reinvent themselves of how they interact. They should be talking to their prospect or customer beforehand and after, redirecting. So they have to change the way that how they use these virtual events, which is very uncomfortable for them. So I would just say, we've seen that we still have enough to feed the mouths of sales, but how they're using the tools, they want to use it the old way, and you need to teach them how to use it in a new way.
Very, very much true. Well, thank you very much for everyone's participation on this panel. I think we could probably keep going. I know from SINC's perspective, we will be looking to host a discussion like this probably once a month coming into the new year. I think it's a great platform for marketers to have an opportunity to discuss kind of some of the opportunities ahead of them. Those of you that we weren't able to get to your questions, we'll make sure to answer those via email. Once again, thank you all for participating. We appreciate taking the time today. Tom, thank you for co-moderating. And for those of you who haven't had a chance to download our report, I will be listing it in the chat window shortly as well, and look forward to our next discussion. Thank you all and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.